If this was in a movie, you'd call it unrealistic. Today, 33 dumb secret government projects people keep calling fake. Like the CIA's MK Ultra dosing people with LSD and a fake Howard Hughes mining ship grabbing a Soviet sub. Stay for number 33. The last one is insane. Alright, let's start with the Manhattan Project and how it stayed hidden. The Manhattan Project built the first atomic bomb in secret. One secret program changed war, science, and the modern world. In 1942, General Leslie Groves built the Manhattan Project. He hired J. Robert Oppenheimer and hid labs at Los Alamos. Oak Ridge enriched uranium, while Hanford brewed plutonium beside rivers. Workers had badges and code names but rarely knew the goal. In July 1945, Trinity lit the New Mexico desert like sunrise. Oppenheimer watched the fireball, while Groves guarded every telegram. Weeks later, Hiroshima and Nagasaki proved the secrecy had teeth. Even today, Los Alamos stories feel unreal, and they happened. 2. MK Ultra tried to engineer mind control with LSD. People were drugged for experiments, without knowing the sponsor. In the early 1950s, CIA chemist Sidney Gottlieb launched MK Ultra. He pushed LSD tests on soldiers, prisoners, and unwitting civilians. In Montreal, psychiatrist Ewan Cameron ran brutal brainwashing-style sessions. Some subjects were paid, others lured through fake clinics and bars. The CIA even dosed people at parties, then watched reactions. When Congress asked questions, many MK Ultra files were destroyed. The Church Committee later exposed fragments, and the puzzle looked ugly. The scariest twist is how ordinary the paperwork sounded. 3. Operation Paperclip secretly recruited Nazi scientists for America. America's rocket age jumped forward by importing former enemy brains. After World War II, Operation Paperclip targeted German scientists. Werner von Braun and his team moved from Peenemünde to America. Army officers scrubbed records, then shipped families to Fort Bliss. Soon they were in Huntsville, building Redstone rockets for the Cold War. NASA later used their Saturn V work to reach the moon. The moral math stayed messy, and officials argued behind closed doors. J. Edgar Hoover warned about optics, but momentum kept rolling. It's a thriller where the heroes and villains switch uniforms. 4. Area 51 tested next-generation aircraft behind locked fences. Some of America's weirdest aircraft flew where maps went blank. At Groom Lake, Nevada, Area 51 grew around secrecy. In the 1950s, CIA crews tested the U-2 spy plane. Later came Lockheed's A-12 Oxcart, built by Skunk Works. Workers rode unmarked buses from Las Vegas, sworn to silence. Pilots wore pressure suits, like astronauts, but stayed over deserts. People saw lights, guessed aliens, and the rumors did free security. Even today, official answers arrive late and always incomplete. The real mystery is how many prototypes never left the hangar. 5. NSA PRISM quietly collected data from major tech firms. A single leak made the word surveillance feel painfully concrete. In 2013, Edward Snowden revealed NSA collection programs like PRISM. PRISM worked through legal orders aimed at foreign intelligence targets. Data requests went through the FISA court, mostly behind closed doors. The shock was scale, not spies in trench coats. Snowden fled through Hong Kong, then surfaced in Moscow. Tech companies denied direct access, yet compliance debates exploded anyway. Congress rewrote parts of law, but the trust damage lingered. It proved secrets can collapse overnight, like ice underfoot. 6. COINTELPRO ran covert domestic spying and disruption campaigns. An FBI program quietly turned protests into personal nightmares. From the 1950s to 1970s, COINTELPRO targeted American activists. J. Edgar Hoover's FBI infiltrated groups, from civil rights to anti-war. They forged letters, spread rumors, and pushed leaders into feuds. Martin Luther King Jr. was surveilled, harassed, and relentlessly pressured. The Black Panther Party faced informants, raids, and constant disruption. In 1971, burglars stole FBI files in Media, Pennsylvania. Those documents exposed the playbook, and Congress demanded hearings. It's espionage at home, dressed up as paperwork and stamps. 7. Project Azorian tried to lift a sunken Soviet submarine. The CIA tried to steal a Soviet submarine from the ocean. In the early 1970s, Moscow lost submarine K-129 in the Pacific. CIA planners called it Project Azorian and needed a giant ship. Howard Hughes became the cover with the Glomar Explorer. The ship carried a hidden claw built to grab steel underwater. In 1974, crews lowered it miles down, like fishing for tanks. Part of the sub broke, and the mission turned tense fast. When reporters asked, the CIA invented the Glomar-style non-answer. It's the heist movie where gravity and secrecy fight back. 8. Operation Gladio built secret stay-behind armies across Europe. Europe hid armies within armies, waiting for a Soviet invasion. After World War II, NATO-linked networks formed under Operation Gladio. In Italy, caches of weapons were buried for stay-behind fighters. Similar groups existed in Belgium and elsewhere, often quietly funded. The public learned more when Prime Minister Giulio Andreotti spoke. Parliaments demanded answers, and old Cold War shadows suddenly moved. Some linked Gladio to terrorism claims, while others disputed connections. What's certain is the infrastructure existed, secret radios included. It's like finding a fire escape you never knew existed. 9. The Stargate project funded government remote viewing experiments. The US military paid people to stare at targets mentally. In the 1970s, research began at Stanford Research Institute in California. Remote viewing meant describing distant places using only imagination. Ingo Swann drew sketches, and officials kept hoping for miracles. Later, Fort Meade hosted sessions with Joseph McMonigle and others. Sometimes they chased Soviet sites, sometimes a hostage or aircraft. Results were mixed, yet classified funding kept trickling for years. In the 1990s, reviews ended the program, quietly and politely. It's spy work with no gadgets, just awkward silence. 10. Project Iceworm planned nuclear missiles under Greenland ice. Greenland's ice almost became a hidden missile highway. In the late 1950s, the US Army started Project Iceworm. The plan imagined tunnels storing nuclear missiles aimed at the USSR. Engineers fought drifting ice because walls slowly squeezed inward. When planners realized the tunnels would buckle, the dream collapsed. It's a Cold War castle built on moving sand. 11. Operation Mockingbird secretly shaped media narratives during Cold War. Newsrooms became battlegrounds, and the weapons were whispers. During the Cold War, CIA officials cultivated journalists under Operation Mockingbird. Stories could be nudged, killed, or framed through friendly contacts. The public didn't see the wiring until Senate investigators pried. The Church Committee described a web, even if details stayed murky. The twist is, influence can look exactly like normal reporting. 12. Operation Chaos targeted anti-war activists with secret surveillance. The CIA, built for overseas spying, turned its gaze inward. In the late 1960s, Operation Chaos tracked anti-war and activist groups. Analysts built files on Americans even though that was restricted. They watched travelers, copied mail, and traded leads with the FBI. The codename sounded harmless, like paperwork, not a dragnet. By the 1970s, exposure came, and officials scrambled to explain. Sometimes the shock is simply who was collecting the notes. 13. Room 641A allegedly split internet traffic for NSA monitoring. A plain office room became a symbol of modern surveillance. In San Francisco, AT&T's 611 Folsom building housed Room 641A. Technician Mark Klein described fiber splitters copying internet traffic. He said the copy line routed into equipment linked to intelligence. Suddenly, phone company plumbing sounded like a spy movie set. Lawsuits followed, arguing privacy, legality, and the meaning of consent. AT&T denied specifics, while government officials leaned on secrecy rules. The story stuck because the room had a number, not a name. It's the kind of detail that makes paranoia feel organized. 14. Project Blue Book investigated UFO reports with government backing. A flood of UFO reports forced the Air Force to respond. From 1952, Project Blue Book investigated sightings across the United States. Officer Edward Ruppold organized cases, trying to filter noise from signal. Astronomer J. Allen Hynek began skeptical, then grew cautiously curious. In 1952, Washington's skies sparked panic, and jets chased lights. Some incidents became weather balloons, planets, or misread aircraft. Others stayed unexplained, which only fed stronger stories afterward. Blue Book ended in 1969, saying UFOs weren't a security threat. That conclusion didn't stop Americans from looking up anyway. 15. Project Mogul used balloons to track Soviet nuclear tests. A crashed balloon helped ignite America's most famous UFO story. In 1947, Project Mogul used balloons to detect Soviet nuclear tests. They carried microphones and radar reflectors drifting over New Mexico. Near Roswell, wreckage scattered, and the Army issued mixed statements. A press release mentioned a flying disc, then walked it back. Rancher McBrazel found debris, while officers rushed to retrieve it. Secrecy around Soviet detection made truth sound like a cover story. Decades later, Mogul explanations arrived, but Roswell had already grown. Sometimes the twist is just a bad headline meeting silence. 16. Operation Gold Dug A, Berlin Tunnel to tap Soviet lines. A tunnel under Berlin became a Cold War listening post. In the mid-1950s, the CIA and MI6 dug Operation Gold. They started from West Berlin and aimed for Soviet landlines. Thousands of tons of soil disappeared, and nobody noticed the trick. George Blake, a British officer, secretly told Moscow the plan. The Soviets let it run anyway, feeding lines while protecting secrets. For months, Western analysts recorded calls, translating every detail. Then Moscow staged a discovery, and the tunnel became a scandal. It's espionage with both sides winking, and nobody admitting it. 17. The Venona Project decrypted Soviet espionage messages for decades. A code-breaking project quietly exposed spies hiding in plain sight. During World War II, U.S. analysts began the Venona Project. At Arlington Hall, cryptanalysts decrypted Soviet cables, one fragment at a time. The messages used one-time pads, supposed to be unbreakable. But Soviet mistakes reused pages, and that tiny flaw mattered. Decoded names pointed to networks linked with Manhattan Project secrets. Cases like Julius and Ethel Rosenberg later echoed those decrypts. For decades, the program stayed classified, so debates stayed heated. It's the slowest plot twist imaginable, revealed letter by letter. 18. Acoustic Kitty tried to turn a cat into a spy. A cat was turned into a gadget, and it went badly. In the 1960s, the CIA explored a plan called Acoustic Kitty. Engineers implanted a microphone, a transmitter, and an antenna tail. The idea was eavesdropping on Soviet diplomats in public parks. Training involved noise, hunger, and the stubborn reality of animals. On an early test, the cat ran into traffic and died. It's funny until you picture technicians seriously measuring feline performance. Sometimes the most insane plans start with a straight face. 19. Project West Forward put copper needles into Earth orbit. The US once sprinkled space with metal, like cosmic confetti. In the early 1960s, Project West Forward launched millions of copper needles. MIT Lincoln Laboratory designed dipoles to bounce radio signals globally. Satellites were new and fragile, so planners wanted a backup. The needles formed a ring, thin enough to be mostly invisible. Astronomers protested, fearing junk would ruin observations in future launches. Most needles slowly fell, but the idea still sounds wild. Imagine explaining that plan at dinner without getting stared at. Space wasn't just explored, it was engineered with questionable taste. 20. Project A119 planned a nuclear blast on the moon. Someone seriously considered nuking the moon for a spectacle. In the late 1950s, the US Air Force studied Project A119. The goal was a visible blast, proving power during the space race. Physicist Leonard Riefel led analysis, with young Carl Sagan contributing. They worried about fallout stories and losing the world's sympathy. A darkened lunar surface would also look terrifying on television. The plan died before launch, replaced by quieter scientific priorities. Still, the paperwork shows how publicity could steer policy. It's the ultimate flex that never happened, and that's lucky. 21. Project Orion designed a nuclear pulse spaceship the size of a city. Engineers planned a spaceship powered by nuclear explosions behind it. In the late 1950s, Project Orion attracted serious scientists and funding. Physicist Freeman Dyson worked on designs at General Atomics. A thick pusher plate would absorb shock, like a giant drum. Each bomb would push, then springs would soften the punch. Planes imagined Mars trips, even massive interstellar versions on paper. Then the 1963 Test Ban Treaty made it politically impossible. Orion faded, yet its math still fascinates aerospace historians. It's the only rocket concept that sounds louder than it flies. 22. Operation Plowshare tried to use nukes for mega construction. The US tried to use nuclear blasts as construction tools. Project Plowshare promised canals, harbors, and mines carved by explosions. In Nevada, the Sedan test dug a gigantic crater in seconds. Officials filmed it like a demo reel, complete with confident smiles. Radioactive dust traveled, and that detail ruined the sales pitch. Some ideas aimed at natural gas, trying to fracture rock underground. Communities pushed back, and the dream of nuclear Earth moving shrank. The name sounded peaceful, but the method was pure blast. It's a reminder that clever branding can't beat physics. 23. Have Blue proved stealth aircraft could actually work? Stealth warfare began with a weird faceted jet nobody saw. In the 1970s, Lockheed Skunk Works built the Have Blue demonstrators. Engineer Ben Rich pushed designs shaped to confuse radar reflections. The body looked like a flying diamond because angles mattered. 2 prototypes crashed, yet data proved the low radar idea worked. The Air Force kept it quiet, then ordered the F-77 Nighthawk. Pilots trained at night in Nevada, avoiding curious eyes. Radar operators saw almost nothing, which was the whole trick. It's like turning invisible by becoming ugly on purpose. 24. The U-2 spy plane program. Hid in plain sight. One downed plane nearly detonated a diplomatic bomb. The U-2 program sent cameras above 60,000 feet over the USSR. CIA backed Lockheed's Kelly Johnson, building the plane in secrecy. In 1960, pilot Francis Gary Powers was shot down near Sverdlovsk. Washington claimed a weather flight until Moscow showed the pilot alive. Nikita Khrushchev milked the moment, humiliating the Eisenhower administration. Peace talks collapsed and the Cold War temperature jumped overnight. Powers was traded later, in Berlin, for spy Rudolf Abel. It's a reminder that altitude helps, until politics pulls you down. 25. The SR-71 Blackbird stayed secret longer than you think. A black jet outran missiles, yet its existence stayed half-hidden. Lockheed Skunk Works built the A-12, then the SR-71 Blackbird. Kelly Johnson demanded titanium and supply chains got very complicated. The jet flew from California to Nevada test ranges at night. It cruised above Mach 3, so fuel leaked until it warmed. Pilots wore pressure suits and needed training like high-altitude astronauts. Reconnaissance flights skimmed borders, photographing targets without crossing lines. Even its public debut came late, after rumors had grown legs. The twist is the fastest plane was also the quietest secret. 26. Operation Sea Spray secretly tested airborne dispersion over San Francisco. A city became a lab, and most residents never knew. In 1950, the U.S. Navy ran Operation Sea Spray over San Francisco. Ships released bacteria thought harmless to study how clouds spread. The mist drifted through neighborhoods, over piers, and into busy streets. Doctors later saw infections rise, though links were debated for years. The public learned decades later, when documents surfaced about the test. Officials argued it was routine, but routine shouldn't involve strangers. San Francisco wasn't chosen for beauty, but for predictable sea winds. 27. Operation LAC sprayed cities with particles to track dispersion. The Army sprayed particles over cities, like invisible paint. Operation LAC stood for Large Area Coverage, and it was literal. Tests reached places like St. Louis, Minneapolis, and parts of Canada. The goal was tracking airflow, imagining chemical attacks during war. Most people assumed it was just normal sky haze and exhaust. Years later, veterans and residents demanded records and health answers. Government responses shifted over time, and that only fueled suspicion. It's a reminder that experiments can travel farther than airplanes. 28. Project Sunshine secretly collected samples to study nuclear fallout. Fallout fear led scientists to collect samples in unsettling ways. After early nuclear tests, Project Sunshine measured radioactive strontium in humans. Researchers focused on children's bones because strontium mimics calcium. Labs in the US and abroad gathered specimens, sometimes without clear consent. Scientists compared places like Utah, Australia, and Britain for fallout levels. When details surfaced, officials insisted it protected public health planning. Families heard rumors, then learned the program had been quietly running. The data helped track fallout, but the methods stained trust. Sunshine sounds cheerful until you learn what they actually studied. 29. Project Shad tested shipboard defense against chemical threats. Sailors became test subjects long after they'd left the Navy. Project Shad meant shipboard hazard and defense, a Cold War program. In the 1960s, Pentagon teams ran trials on U.S. ships at sea. They released simulants or agents, then measured how ventilation carried clouds. Crew members often weren't told details, only given extra masks in drills. Some tests happened near Hawaii, others near Maryland, shifting with schedules. Decades later, veterans asked why illnesses weren't connected sooner. Documents slowly surfaced, and the acronym SHAD suddenly meant something personal. It's a war game, where the battlefield was the ship itself. 30. Project Camelot studied revolutions to predict and control unrest. A research project triggered diplomatic fury before it even finished. In the mid-1960s, the U.S. Army launched Project Camelot. The idea was studying revolutions, predicting unrest, and guiding countermeasures. Social scientists were recruited, with funding routed through military channels. In Chile, scholars discovered the sponsor, and the backlash was immediate. The Chilean government protested, seeing it as meddling in domestic politics. Washington canceled Camelot, but similar research shifted names and continued. It showed how academic language can mask strategic intentions. Camelot wasn't knights and legends, it was spreadsheets and coup fears. 31. Operation Washtub hid covert spy caches in remote Alaska. In Alaska, the CIA planned for invasion with hidden survival caches. Operation Washtub prepared supplies for agents if the Soviets came. Caches held radios, weapons, and money, sealed against harsh weather. Teams hid them near remote coastlines, reachable by small boats. The logic was simple. If Alaska falls, resistance must start fast. Even local partners often didn't know who buried the packages. Over time, some caches were recovered, others reportedly stayed lost. It's like a treasure hunt where the map is classified. The twist is planning for war meant hiding things in peace. 32. Project Cold Feet sent spies onto an abandoned Arctic station. A frozen Soviet station became a stage for a Hollywood extraction. In 1962, the CIA targeted an abandoned drifting station called NP-8. Agents landed on the Arctic ice, racing daylight and wind. They grabbed documents, equipment, and manuals before the floe cracked. The escape used Robert Fulton's skyhook, a balloon and airplane snatch. One man clipped in, rose into the air, then got yanked. The plane reeled him in, like fishing, but with screaming engines. The Arctic swallowed the station later, erasing the evidence. Cold Feet sounds like a joke, until you picture that lived. 33. Project Jennifer used ocean mining as a CIA cover story. The world thought it was mining, but it was espionage at sea. Project Jennifer was the CIA codename tied to the K-129 salvage. Howard Hughes fronted the story, selling a deep-sea mining narrative. The Glomar Explorer looked industrial, which made the cover believable. Inside, engineers built secret bays, cranes, and that massive capture claw. When journalists sniffed around, officials offered careful non-denials and delays. That evasive answer later became famous as the Glomar response. Even within government, only small circles knew the real objective. It's a con job so big it needed its own ship,